interruptions, please silence all devices. All participants on Zoom, except for board members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute. You will not be able to mute or unmute your line manually. After each agenda item, public comment will be taken. If you are participating in person and wish to comment, please use the iPads which are located in the lobby if the meeting is in the auditorium. For meetings in other locations, please complete a blue speaker card and provide the card to a South Coast AQMD employee. If you are participating on Zoom and wish to comment, please click on the Raise Hand button. If you're participating by phone and wish to comment, please dial *9. When it is your turn to speak, your name will be called. For phone participants, your name or part of your phone number will be called when it is your turn, and the host will unmute your line. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all items on the agenda. Following the meeting agenda items, a general public comment period is allowed to provide the public an opportunity to speak on any items not on the agenda. During the general public comment period, speakers may be limited to 3 minutes or less. The amount of time to comment may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. For questions or issues related to making public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-3247. That's 909-396-3247. In terms of decorum, if this meeting is taking place in the auditorium, no food or beverages are allowed in the auditorium. In accordance with state and local public health department guidelines, people may choose to wear a mask based on personal preference while in South Coast AQMD facilities. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Lastly, please be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you agree to authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
All right, that concludes excuse me, our housekeeping. Good afternoon, everyone. Deputy Executive Officer Jason Aspel over Engineering and Permitting Department. Welcome to our first hybrid BACT SRC meeting. So we are still bringing attendee or SRC members from attendees over to the panelist side. If any SRC members are still in the attendees side, please raise your hands and we'll bring everyone over that needs to be over. Excuse me. So first off, just wanted to thank everybody for attending, particularly our SRC members. We do know that this is quite a time investment, but we do appreciate your input and again, the time you afford to this process. This is our first meeting of the year. This is essentially our scoping meeting of what we're going to be looking at in the coming weeks and months. So we will be presenting a number of items, and we'll be stopping for public comment after each of the agenda items. So make sure we hear everybody, and we will be accepting written comments for time after this meeting. So we encourage everybody to submit those written comments. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the meeting over to Bhaskar and our BACT staff as well, and we'll also follow with a roll call shortly after.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bhaskar Chandan. I'm the manager here in the refinery permitting and the BACT team. And welcome again. It's been about a year. Last time we met was Al Bias's last meeting when he was retiring. So it's been a year, and coincidentally, exactly a year, because the last meeting was February 23rd, 2022. Then it took us a little while to get to the board, but the previous round of the BACT got updated late last year. So now we are back with some more proposals. As Jason mentioned, this is a scoping meeting, so we are presenting what we think we need to update the guidelines for. And that's what we'll be going through. And we'll provide, this is just, we are just providing you basics right now. And then later on, we'll provide all the details in the next meeting. So with that, let me hand it over to Barre and we can do the roll calls.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bahar Farahani. I'm the BACT program supervisor. And let's go over the roll call. So I'm calling your organization. I appreciate if you introduce yourself and also your affiliation. EPA Region 9. And if any of the panelists, SRC members are still in the attendees, please raise your hand and we will move you to the panelist. CARP. I saw Pippin, he was.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself and turn on my video, but I'm Pippin Mader from the California Air Resources Board.
Hi, Pippin. Thank you.
Thank you.
San Diego APCD. CEC. Bay Area AQMD.
Nicholas Manning, Bay Area.
I mean, Southern California Edison.
Kendra Jukes, Southern California Edison.
Southern California Gas. Okay. Los Angeles County Sanitation District.
Here.
Hi, David. Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
This is Bang Feng.
Hi, Ben. OC Sanitation District.
Hi, everyone. Rhonda Bushman, OCSAM.
Hi, Rania. WESPA.
Patty Senecal.
California Small Business Alliance.
The Executive Director of the California Alliance of Small Business Associations, formerly the California Small Business Alliance, but.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Red Tech.
Good afternoon, Rita Loof, Red Tech.
Good afternoon. York.
Judy York, York Engineering.
Montrose.
Carl Laney with Montrose Environmental Solutions.
Ship and Shore. I haven't seen Anusha. Foul Weather. I haven't seen Gary either. Not in the attendees. Oh, Gary is here. Okay, just give me a second here. Okay, here you are. Do you hear us, Gary?
Gary, we are doing a roll call, so if you can hear us.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, can you hear me now?
UC Riverside.
Here.
UC Irvine. And Natural Resources Defense Council. So David.
Hi, this is David Pettit.
Hi, David. Okay, I guess we have a majority of our SRC members. So let's start the presentation for the sake of time. Paul, could you please start it? And I appreciate if any of the panelists, they have their microphone on, they mute themselves. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the quick agenda, and what we are planning to do today is this time is the first BACT SRC meeting for this year. So we are going over what we have already approved in the last BACT SRC and has been approved by the board actually in September. And then we will dive into the proposed new and updates to major source facility BACT determination, and then right after for the minor source. And also, we, like always, we have some clarification and modification to the overview policy and procedures. Also, we have some other BACT updates we wanted to share with you. And eventually will be discussion, and we will open it to the public comments. And finally, we will brief you on the next step we need to go to eventually get the board approval on this BACT determination. Next slide, please. So this one is a summary of what we have done so far the past year. We did some changes on the BACT guidelines, and just for those of you may not very familiar with the BACT guideline document. So the overview part of the BACT guideline pretty much is an introduction to the BACT procedures and how we establish BACT. And then we have a technical parts, which is separated to three main parts. One of them is for major source facility, bigger polluting facilities. And then we have a policy procedure and also the determination for smaller facilities. We call them non-major polluting facilities. And the last section is for the greenhouse gases. So far, you see here that what we have done in the past, we have about 7 new listings and a few updated listings to the guideline. And also, like always, we updated the cost effectiveness criteria in the guideline. And this is the timeline. It shows that we had those 3 first BACT SRC meetings, and following with the 30-day public comment period. And eventually we took it to the Station Resource Committee meeting, and in September 2020, it has been approved by our governing board. And I would like to thank you, all the people that provide us with the inputs and their questions and comments to develop the last BACT guideline. Next slide, please. The very first BACT determination we have is for the fugitive emission source at petroleum refineries. Before going through every single BACT determination, if you notice on the title, we define Part B, which is again for the major polluting facilities. Also, we mentioned this is, for example, for Section 1. So for major source facilities, we have 2 sections. The reason I'm telling this because last time when we did the BACT determination for IC engines, since we used other air districts determination, so we receive calls or emails sometimes that people ask us if you updated on the website or not. So I just want to let you know that if any of those BACT determinations is based on other air districts, when it gets approved, we always upload it under Section 2 of the website, our BACT page. So you will not be able to find it on Section 1. You need to go to Section 2 to find the determination, the details. So this one is based on one of the permits that we have in our district. And this is actually the emission from the VOC service and the components that we have in the refineries. So you know that there are several fittings and connectors that they can cause the fugitive emissions from, the volatile organic compounds in the facility. So this BACT determination is to establish a 200 leak standard on those type of fugitive, but it doesn't include pumps, compressors, and drains. So for the pump and compressor and drains, still they are subject to Rule 1173, and it is still 500 ppm. And as you see at the last bullet, so when we do the leak, when the facility, they do the leak check. So any leak greater than 20 ppm and less than 100 ppm, they need to repair it within 7 days, and then they have another extended 7 days, so total of 14 days of the detection and repair of the leak. Next slide. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that Anusha from Ship and Shore is on the attendee side, so just so you know.
I appreciate that, Rita. Thank you so much. How does it come? Oh, okay. Gary, I see you have a raised hand.
Yeah, just a question on that previous listing. Is there a reason why the repair deadline is only applicable if the leak is less than 1,000 ppm? Is there a separate provision for leaks for the concentrations greater than 1,000?
Sorry, your voice is a little bit hard for me to, can you repeat it again?
Yes, the question is whether there's something missing from this and why there isn't some kind of requirement for leaks that are greater than 1,000 ppm.
Well, actually, we have, when we doing the leak inspection, there are different thresholds. So for different one, there are different requirements in Rule 1173. And it's supposed to be, what we have in the rule right now is 500 ppm, but we have some achieving practice at 2 ppm, and we permitted those facilities. So that's why we are lowering just that 200 ppm, but the rest of the numbers, they are still consistent with the Rule 1173.
So, yeah, Gary, the rule covers pretty much all other leaks, higher leaks when it's a violation, what your frequency is for fixing all those leaks. So it's under Rule 1173.
Thank you.
I see, Pat, you have raised hand too.
Okay, I just had a couple quick questions. We had a chance to review the slides in advance. So the first comment has to do with the VOC BACT. And the thought is, should that be based on the design threshold of the fugitive component, the connectors, the valves, the flanges, and not based on a screening value that is, may come in the permit condition? So asking that should be based on the design threshold of the fugitive components.
This one, as I mentioned, this doesn't apply to pump and compressor, so pretty much is not kind of involved with the design of the system. Mostly it applies to, for example, valves. So for those type of fittings, when they want to go below the threshold, pretty much what they do is, like, for example, they tightening that, or they do some sort of housekeeping. So it doesn't need to change the design or the type of the equipment. That's why we didn't exclude pump compressor at this point. Did I answer your question?
Was more about the threshold. Then what you're confirming, this standard only applies to valves and connectors.
Anything in the which is listed under Rule 1173 except pump, compressors, and drains.
Okay. And then I also wanted to comment on the 14-day that was just brought up. It will be a challenge to meet this repair timeline of 14 days, especially on critical components such as these control valves. And so for consideration is, could control valves be categorically exempt from the 200 ppm requirement? Because not having to shut down units to repair control valves, it avoids causing additional emissions from a startup and a shutdown. So I wanted to put that out for consideration.
Sure. I totally understand your point, and thank you for bringing it up. One of the things that I want to clarify here is that so far right now, the facility, they need to keep track of those leaks. So right now, for example, for some of the facilities, it's still 500 ppm. So they need to keep track of that. And if the leak is more than that, they still have these 14 days under the rule. So this is just something that we take from the rule. We didn't make it more stringent, the time frame. But going from 500 to 200, you may have more fugitive components that you can detect leak from them. But when we look at the inventory of a few of the facilities, we notice that pretty much what, as I mentioned, they do, this is just some sort of housekeeping, like they're tightening the valves. And when they do that, usually the emission is dropping so low. So for example, from 2000 ppm, it drops to 20, 30 ppm. So it really doesn't affect, from 500 to 200, because there are not that many that they falls between 200 and 500 ppm for some of the facilities. Maybe if Boswell you want to.
Yeah, Patty, in this would apply to new components only going forward. So it wouldn't apply to the ones that are already in place. So sometimes, refineries have taken that limit for the entire process voluntarily, but the BACT is only for the new components.
Yeah, and actually this is a good point that Bhaskar brought up, not just for this determination, for the rest of them also please pay attention that these are always applied if your emission is emission increase is more than 1 pound per day or equal to 1 pound per day. So if not, it is not going to trigger that. It is different from BART and rule limit.
Okay. All right. I had 2 more questions. Can I go quick or do you want me to rotate? Let somebody else go? I see another hand up or.
Let's go to Nick, I believe, just for the sake of time, if you can just, because we will again open it for questions a little bit later, if it is okay to you.
Okay, well, I had a question on this slide.
Okay, go ahead then.
Okay, I'll go quick. So WISPA would recommend that the district consider incorporating language similar to what San Joaquin Valley did with the rule 4409 into permit conditions for essential and critical components. And again, we'll provide some follow-up comments in a letter, or I can read you, what the San Joaquin actually did. But if the leak has been minimized to less than 500 ppm, the leak shall exceed 200 ppm. The essential components or critical components shall be repaired or replaced to eliminate the leak during the next process unit turnaround, but in no case later than 1 year from the date of the original leak. So you might already have that language, or we can send it over as well.
We appreciate if you just send us the written comment. Would be easier for us, to look at that. And yeah, definitely we will look and we will reply back to you. Thank you.
And then last question is, does the BARC threshold for the fugitive emission sources, is that for light liquid components?
It is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Before we jump over to the other questions, just so everyone understands the format, at the end of each agenda item, which will be this first batch of slides, we'll pause again for SRC comments and then open it up to public comments before moving to the next agenda item. We numbered our agenda items for this round to facilitate that discussion a little bit more, but we'll pause for these questions right now. Thank you. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, should I save my comments then for the end of the slides, responding to your comment?
I think for this one, let's keep going with the questions and then we'll keep moving, but so everyone understands the format. Okay,
for when you're doing a question, are you looking at BARC rules from other ed districts when you're establishing these BACT layer determinations?
Actually, Nick, we look at some of the, for instance, we look at the rule 4455 for San Joaquin, and also we look at the BACT determination from other air districts. So far, we know that Santa Barbara, Bay Area, you guys, and also San Joaquin, they already have 100 ppm leak limit for the light, liquid, and gases. So we will look at those numbers too, but is there any specific rule you're referring to?
Yeah, I was going to refer to our rule 818, and that, to be clear, that limit applies to all components, gas, light, liquid, and heavy liquid service. So it's 100 ppm for valves and connectors, minimize the leak in 24 hours and repair in 7 days if found by the operator. It has to be repaired within 24 hours if it's found by the air district.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick, for that. Yeah, basically, this is something that was the listing that we are doing. It's a layer listing. It has been on the permit for about 8 years now. So we are just putting it in our layer guidelines.
Okay, yeah, rule, I think that standard will look again. I think it's been in place since 1998. So we've got plenty of data from our local refineries showing compliance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nick, could I ask you a question? Patty mentioned an exception in San Joaquin for essential and critical components. Do do you have that as well for Bay Area?
Yeah, we have a requirement to test and comply with a mass emission limit. They have to repair, they go on a turnaround list, there's a repair list, and some timing, but if there are essential critical equipment, there's some, they give a relief for that.
Thank you.
Rita, go ahead, please.
Yes, sorry. Just wanted to get you a message from Anusha. She said that she has no access to the mute button. She's still on the attendee side, so she can't switch over to the panelist side. She hasn't been switched. Just wanted to pass that along.
Anusha, can you see if you see my, because I believe you need to accept it. Does it work this time?
Yeah, we tried to move her, but she needs to accept it on her end.
I guess she did this time.
I just
perfect.
did. It
Thank
was
you.
allowed. Thank you so very much, and thank you, Rita, for taking the message across.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So this BACT determination again applies to the major polluting facilities, bigger facility, and it is for a heater. And this is the achieving practice case we use. It is located in one of our terminal, and the facility receives gasoline and also diesel fuel through the pipeline, and they operate bulk loading station to transfer the product into the tanker trucks. So as we explained here, they installed, they kind of replaced the old burners with the new technology, ultra low NOx burner in these heaters. And by doing so, they were able to achieve a low emission of 7 ppm NOx, and also the CO limit is 100 ppm. As you have seen here, they sourced this heater back in 2021, and it shows that the emission limit was less than about 6.25 for the NOx. And that's why we found that this is an achieving practice. It has been permitted and it is working under compliance, and we propose that as a new addition to our BACT guideline for the heater. Just a second, Gary, are we going to go through all the end of the agenda item, or we want to stop after each determination? So maybe, Gary, if quick, please go ahead. I don't see any other raised hand. And then after that, I will go all the way to the end of part D, part B, and then we will come back and answer the questions to SRC and then
Gary, go ahead and answer your questions, and then we'll just,
Well, that's okay. Now that I understand, I'll just wait and we'll come back later. It's a minor question. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. The third BACT determination is some kind of relatively new technology, although the main technology is not that new. It has been used for other applications since 1960. But this is a linear generator for non-emergency electrical generation. And this BACT determination is solely on natural gas. And the kind of the technology is a free piston, which is they kind of call this system free piston because there is no crankshaft which is connected to the rod, and that technology kind of helps it to reduce all of those friction that reduce the efficiency. Right now, our rule staff also looking through this technology, and we have under Rule 1103.1, the new rule, they are going to adopt it soon. This facility we use as an achievement practice. They do have 2 installation of this type of linear generators. As you see, the module is like a server, a box on the right-hand side, which has 2 core. So pretty much these linear generators, the way the setup is, the design is they have 2 core parallel, they are working in tandem. And this facility has two of those, total of 4 linear generator cords. And the total, it is 240 kilowatt total. And these are the NOx CO VOC limit, which is under the permitted pieces of equipment we have. So for NOx is 2.5. As you see, it is a very low NOx limit. And the reason is that this type of technology working at a very low temperature, and it doesn't cause excess amount of NOx. The CO is permitted at 12 and the VOC is 25. So we did source this on multiple of those linear generators so far, and these are the results of this achieving practice case. And it shows that they were able to meet the emission limit. And also it is have a oxidation catalyst for the CO control. Next slide, please. Then this sulfur recovery unit, it is one of the permitted unit in our refineries. And this is pretty much includes the tail gas treatment unit, tail gas incinerator, and caustic scrubber. The incinerator is equipped with a low NOx burner with a maximum heat input rate of 50 million BTU per hour. And then the caustic scrubber used to remove the sulfur from the sulfur compounds. And the proposed layer limits for this BACT determination for NOx is 0.05 pounds per million BTU of natural gas, and for CO is 0.03, and the SOx is 12. And also, again, this one has been source tested and shows that it were in compliance over these past few years. Next slide, please. I believe this is the last achieving practice in our air district, which is the tank truck loading racks. Again, this is the same facility that we use the achieving practice for the heater, the terminal. So for this facility, they have multiple loading racks and storage tanks. So they use the vapor recovery collection and disposal system to control VOC. And this VOC vapors, they go through thermal oxidizer to reduce the emissions. And the VOC emission limit is 0.02 per 1,000 gallons of the fuel. And it has been source tested that also shows compliance with the permit limit. And in addition, we have an overall control efficiency of 99% for this vapor recovery system. And this is another proposal that we brought to you for this round. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Bettina to go over the BACT determination for major source from other air districts. And
just a quick one. So Bettina, it's her first SRC. She's part of the BACT team now. She was just promoted to senior engineer in the BACT team. So she'll be doing, and she's helping out Bahre. So Bahre is the supervisor and Bettina is the senior in our BACT team. Go ahead, Bettina.
Thank you, Oscar. So this next one is a new listing as well. It's for natural gas or propane boiler greater than 20 million BTU per hour. This is an achieved in practice case from San Joaquin Valley. They have the natural gas fire tube boiler with a low NOx burner and the selective catalytic reduction system. It's rated about 29 million BTU. This boiler is making steam for an industrial process. The NOx proposed limit that they have here is 2.5 ppm, and the CO is at 50 ppm. And you can see that their source test results did meet that. This boiler has been in operation for over 3 years. And currently our BACT limit for boilers above 20 is 5 ppm NOx and 100 ppm of CO. That is all we have to say about this one. Next slide. This is also a new listing that we're adding, a gas turbine, a simple cycle natural gas turbine. In this case, it is achieved in practice, and they've been in operation over 9 years. There's 4 turbines working together here for a total of 760 megawatts. They each have a selective catalytic reduction and oxidation catalyst included on the turbines. And in this case, the CO limit that they've proposed is 2 ppm, and their current limit is 4 ppm. Our current limit is 4 ppm for CO. You can see that the source test results back up their limit that they're proposing, or that they have added to their permit, and that we are proposing for our layer limit. In this case, our NOx limit is 2 ppm, 2.3 ppm, and theirs is 2.5. So we're not including the NOx as part of this listing, just the CO at the 2 ppm. And the source test, multiple source tests were performed here, and they are doing well with the turbines. Next slide.
Okay. Thank you, Bettina. So now let's open it for the questions. So first of all, let's go through the BACT SRC members, and then we will open it to the public. I see David, you have a raised hand. Oh, sorry, David. Before that, let's go to Gary, because I guess you had a question on the heater, Gary, right? The second slide, and then we will come back to David.
Yeah, my question was whether the 7 ppm number that you showed in the slide is the current permit limit for that facility?
It is about the heater, right?
Correct, about the heater.
Yes, that's the current limit that they have right now using this new type of technology burners.
Okay, and was there only one source test done of that unit, or do you have multiple source tests?
For this one, because they did it back in 2021 so far, I know one of them has been reviewed with our source test staff. I'm not aware of the next one yet, but we can look through it and see if we can get the second one by the next BACT SRC meeting.
The reason why I'm asking those questions is because the proposed, the source test results are only about 10% below the proposed limit. And if you look at all of your other listings, you've got much larger compliance margins demonstrated for all of those other listings. And 10% is getting close to the uncertainty in the method, not the accuracy, but the uncertainty. And so I would think you would want more than just one source test at 90% of the permit limit before you, conclude that, this is an appropriate listing.
Definitely, we will look through that. Also, I wanted to add that this technology has been in operation on several heaters and boilers right now, but again, like since probably 2020, if I'm right, or 2019, and in San Joaquin and also Sacramento. So they do have this one too, but definitely we will look at the second round of source tests before we bring it back to the SRC members.
And I think you could use test data from other facilities with exactly the same burner, same technology to, strengthen the position. But I think, what you're presenting to us is just one test result within 10% of the limit. And I'm not sure that would be strong enough to support the listing.
That's a good point, Gary. Yeah, I think only one source test was required for now. It's pretty new equipment. So yeah, well, we have the manufacturer of the burner here, and we'll have him then provide more source test data from other units that supports this.
Okay, thank you.
David, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I had a question on slide 6 pertaining to the linear generators. Just more of if I understood it correctly, there are 4 separate source tests as far as their core 1, 2, 3, and 4. And can you explain to me how that relates to the proposed limit? I wasn't following as far as you have the proposed layer limits versus a source test results. How do those results correlate to the limit?
Actually, the reason we list and we wanted to show more than one source test, and for this facility, they have two of those servers, two of those boxes. So they have two of those cores. So when they did the sources, they did it on every single core. So the result you see on the last four columns, for example, the first one says core 1, it is specific to one of them. And when they do the source testing, they also do it under like a different loads. So this is the average load we included here. And as you see, for example, for each of them, it shows, for instance, for NOx, it's pretty much less than 2.5 for every single core. The same for CO and VOC.
Understood. Is it multiple points of emission, or are they?
Actually, you're right. When you look at the server right now, if you notice, there is kind of like a box on the side, front and back. So two of them at the end of the module, there are the exhaust. So they open the whole thing. So they open the server, the door, and there are two different exhausts. So when they do the testing, they do it on every single exhaust of each of the cores separately.
Understood. So would it be accurate to say you're combining effectively the limits for the whole unit would be reflected by combining some of those cores? I'm trying to correlate your core emissions, whether that's one stack result or you're adding together.
Let me jump into it. So you see the box there. There are two stacks within that box. They don't combine. They're tested separately. It's just the design of the system. So each core gets tested separately and would meet the limit separately.
Got it. Thank
you. Thing, and also, David just mentioned that when we permitted this type of equipment, so every single core has a different permit. So they submit a different application for every single of them. So we permitted every single of them separately. We do not combine them.
Yeah, they're independent operation within that box. And I'll add too, just for those that may not be aware, we have ongoing rulemaking under 1110.3 for this technology that will be going to the board in a couple months. Currently, what we've permitted right now is at 25 ppm for VOC. In the rule that is proposed to be lowered down to 10, I believe. But for right now, this is what we have achieved in practice.
Thanks for the clarification.
Patty, go ahead, please.
Okay, this is on slide 7, layer for SRUs, and we think it's important that when presenting proposed limits to couple them with proposed averaging periods. So the question is, what is the averaging period for proposed layer limits on SRUs?
This one I need to go back and look, and that's a good point. We will include it in the BACT determination form. And I also want to, since you brought this question, so usually before the second BACT SRC meeting, we provide the SRC members and the public with our BACT determination forms, which include all the details about those determinations. So there are more technical information in regarding to each of them. So we will include them in that one. But to just answering your question, for NOx and CO, right now the permit limit is at 24 hours, and for the SOx is 72 hours. But again, you will find all of those details in the BACT forms for every single of those determinations.
Okay. And I have another question, but it's on slide 9, so I can wait till we get there if you'd like.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So this has to do on slide 9. Layer on the NG propane boilers greater than 20 MMBTU an hour. So the proposal relies on the updated San Joaquin APCD guidelines, which is explicitly limited to units fired solely on natural gas from a PUC regulated source or propane or LPG. Furthermore, that the San Joaquin confirmed in November 2022, and I'm just going to read this quick, that BACT guidelines are only applicable to boilers, steam generators, that are fired solely on natural gas from PUC regulated sources or propane, LPG. These BACT guidelines are not applicable to units fired on refinery fuel gas, waste gas, field gas, process off gas, or a combination of these fuels. We can, provide more details on that, but the question is, can you clarify the applicability of this proposed 2.5 ppm V NOx limit, that it does not apply to units fired on refinery fuel gas, waste gas, field gas, process off gas, for a combination of these types of fuels?
This 2.5 limit we are proposing here is, based on the permit we got from San Joaquin. As you mentioned, this is specific to the natural gas or propane fired. We are not proposing for other type of fuels right now. So this is specific to that. And that's why we also always include the achieving practice case and the BACT determination later in our website, because always BACT is a case-by-case determination. We want to make sure that when the permit engineer or applicant, they are looking through BACT, they are able to see the details of the previous BACT determination to establish the new BACT. So this one only applied to this two fuel right now, and it would not apply to other type of fuels at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
David, go ahead, please. I see that. You're mute.
David, you're mute.
My apologies, I didn't lower my hand.
Oh, okay. No more hands.
Okay, if there's no more questions, let's open it to public, please.
Oh, wait, hold on. I think Wayne has just raised his hand.
Okay. Wayne, you're still mute.
Just quick question. So I know that, is it okay? I know Gary raised the issue on slide 5, and I was surprised that you're setting the LA, the limit at 100 when the test results are less than 2. Anyways, it's just something to talk about. I'm not suggesting it be 2, but that's a deviation. I think someone else will mention that. I know I also agree with Gary that testing that those numbers are just too close. If it's a single, you'd have to have quite a few tests in order to justify a 6.25 versus 7. Because when your number of tests is low, then your uncertainty is much higher. It's no longer 1.96, as we know from t-testing. And the only other question I had in general, and it's just my not understanding, but you have a couple of new NOx limits for SCR systems. And do those SCR systems always include an ammonia limit or not?
Yes, all new SCRs that we permit, they have ammonia. That's been almost for the last 20 years. Always includes the ammonia limit. I've seen limits as high as 20 ppm for some SCRs that were 30-year-old, but now currently the BACT layer limit for SCR ammonia is 5 ppm that we use.
So going to the last, I think Patty had a question about like 9. So there you're establishing a NOx limit. So there'll be a companion ammonia limit for that one as well? Or will it be one? How will you know what the ammonia limit is if you establish that new NOx limit?
Is this, related to the heater, Wayne?
Well, I'm just picking on one that you're that's using SCR.
He's referring to the SRU unit.
Oh, SRU unit.
Yeah, it's just a general question about, on the ammonia limit for new applicants for using SCR. I'm just curious how you set that. Because it doesn't show you.
Maybe it's a confusion. No SRC, the limit, proposed limit here.
Okay.
We're not proposing that limit at this time, but that is something we can bring back on the second meeting for this and provide to the SRC to review that before the next meeting.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just wondered if it was automatic. That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, it definitely noted because it is relevant. And then in regards to, I think the first part of your question, you mentioned the CO limit of why it's not higher. This is achieved in practice and what's on the permit, what's enforceable. So that's what's being proposed for CO. On NOx, I think I definitely hear you. Just for everyone's understanding, for source testing, typically a 10% margin of error is applied in general for that. Even with that, it's under the a proposal, but understand that multiple tests may need to be looked at just for that certainty because it is so close. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Okay. I see, Patty, you have a raised hand.
Yeah, on 6C, upper bound of the boiler rating, can you comment to that? What the question is, what is the upper bound of the boiler rating?
Sorry, I'm just trying to slide 9.
Just to clarify, Patty, are you referring to the boiler greater than 20 million BTU?
Yes. Upper
So
bound of the boiler rating.
this one, let me, yeah, we need to come back to you. I don't have it.
Yeah, basically, we are just incorporating a permit that Sandbalking has issued at that limit, and it's been achieved in practice. So that's what we have a category greater than 20 million BTUs. So we're just incorporating an existing permit which is achieved in practice into our layer guidelines. But yeah, there is, do we have anything higher than 20 ppm? I'm 20 million.
They do have higher than 20 ppm. Actually, they did establish their BACT determination in November 2022, and they put a very good document together, including several boilers smaller than 20 million BTU and larger. And they also have 2 appendix, which includes the source test results, the summary of source test results for every single boiler. So we look at that, and that's how we pick a few of them actually, and then we ask for the permit to operate and also this the more details on the source test, and that's how we establish that. But just let you know that for the boiler less than 20 million BTU, the NOx limit is 5 ppm. And for the larger one is 2.5. And in addition, as you see in the second table, they also have that rule 4320 that has the NOx and CO emission limit. The NOx is the same as their BACT determination at 2.5, but the CO is much higher than the BACT limit.
So I think that that 20 million came from our BACT guidelines in Part D. You know, we have different categories for the BACT. For boilers, there is 2 to 20, and then there is 20 to 75 and greater than 75. So I think that's where we put it, but the final listing will actually list what the actual million BTU rating is, which is 29.47. So, yeah.
Let's go through the last question from SRC, Gary, and then we will open it to public. Gary, please go ahead.
Yeah, just I think though Patty's question about slide 9 was, for example, is the district intending that this limit would apply to a 500 million BTU hour boiler? You specify that it's for greater than 20, but you know, for this technology, is there a maximum for that range?
You know, Part D of our guidelines, the way we categorize it, it's from 20 to 75, and then over 75 million BTU. So,
okay,
I think that's where that 20 came from. But in the final layer listing, you know, that it won't say greater than 20. It will just mention 29.47 million BTU because it's actually a permit that has been issued that we are listing in our BACT guidelines.
But it's going to be in that category of 20 to 75.
I think for clarification, it will be the listing for these Part Bs is an example of a boiler at 20 million. And then if it were to be something higher in the future, then that would be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thanks.
So let's open it to public. So please, if you have questions or comments, raise your hand and we will unmute you. Let's see, Chris.
So any public member who has questions, if you raise your hands, we'll move you to the panelist.
Chris Flagg. Chris Flagg, go ahead.
Chris, go ahead.
Thank you.
Can talk.
This is Chris Flagg from the city of Los Angeles. And I was just wondering if this 2.5 limit, as others had suggested, maybe for if there's a limit to the size that this would apply to, say 75 million BTUs per hour or 200, or how high that goes. And also if this is for new boilers or retrofit or what have you.
So for the first question, definitely we will look to that and we will clarify that in the back determination for the next round. About the second question, sorry, could you please repeat? I forgot.
Yeah, no.
I think, yeah, I can handle it. I think the second question was if it was for new or modified. This would be whenever BACT is triggered, so any new unit coming in for a permit, or if there was a modification resulting in an increase of 1 pound per day or more, that is when BACT would be triggered.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chris, I think we all know your affiliation, but could you state your affiliation and then?
As I said before my comment, Chris Flagg with the City of Los Angeles Bureau of Sanitation.
Thank you. I didn't catch it.
Second. We have Rich. Okay. Rich, could you please go ahead and unmute yourself?
Rich Winfield.
Yeah, this is Rich Winfield with Nationwide Boiler, located down in Los Angeles area. I too also have a question about the steam boilers above 20 million. I do know that the current rule right now for 1146 states at 5 ppm. Is this new BACT ruling to lower that limit down to 2.5 with the requirement of adding SCR to the systems, or if you use a standard ultra low NOx burner that can meet the 5 ppm limit, is that where we're staying, or are we just moving the whole target down to 2.5 ppm?
So it's pretty much when we require the new BACT limit, we are not going to dictate the type of technology. So any kind of technology that you can meet that limit would be fine. So, and BACT is only applies to the new sources, or if there is any modification on an existing sources that cause emission reduction of 1 pound or greater than 1 pound per day. So pretty much you can use any technology to reach that NOx limit.
And Rick, just to clarify, this is a layer listing, so it applies to major sources only. So any new unit at a major source, they will be expected to meet that limit.
Okay, okay, for only major source.
Yes,
correct.
Okay.
Any minor sources would have to go through cost effectiveness evaluation.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. I think we have a Carl. Yeah, your hand's raised.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I want to speak a little bit to what Rich just brought up. I understand for minor sources, and and our BACT policy, that it would allow for recognition of the reality that we're operating under. And that reality, I think, is something we haven't dealt with in a while. And that is that we have technologies now without after control or with minimal after control that are able to get us to very, very low levels in themselves. It seems to me that I've seen in the past, and maybe in other agencies, and admittedly maybe limited to non-layer sources, a recognition of that and recognizing that, yeah, 5 ppm without SCR isn't a bad deal, versus what has to go into getting 2.5 ppm with SCR. Could the district really take another look at how policy might be crafted to recognize the fact that we now have uncontrolled emission sources capabilities that are very, very low emission?
Jason, you want to take it?
Yeah, I think you mean in terms of adding ammonia and SCR versus, just to draw out the comment a little bit, versus not having all that, the associated ammonia slip emissions with 5 ppm. I'm trying to remember in past circumstances where we have weighed out that balance. There is a extreme non-attainment issue in regards to ozone precursors and NOx. So I do definitely note your comment on that.
I think an example, but not at these low levels we're talking about, but a historic example would be the fact, the way in which maybe lean burn engines are treated relative to rich burn engines. The South Coast may not have been as charitable in this particular case, but other agencies have, recognizing what could be achieved by a lean burn engine versus what has to be achieved or what would be achieved with emission controls on a rich burn engine. And those numbers were really high, but now we're talking about starting out with emission sources without emission controls that are at 5 ppm or lower. And we're just squeezing so much more. And I'm really wondering if it warrants more consideration of that, again, that reality. And it's not just a boiler issue. I think we will be coming across these issues with other technologies. And it could be that the other emission control technologies are not as benign as an SCR system.
Right. No, I mean, definitely we can take that back. I think in this case, yeah, we are going down to 2.5. You know, again, percentages, I want to say half, but it is just 2.5. Definitely understand where you're coming from and the extra resources it takes just to demonstrate that increment. In terms of layer, you know, this is one that has been established. But I think we can, you know, I think on all of these, come back, look at the ammonia limits that are associated with them. But there are fairly, again, we're talking about the federal regulations right now and the emissions. But I think for minor sources, we have a little bit more latitude on that.
We have also Sean. Yes, Sean, can you unmute yourself?
Sure. Yeah, this is Sean too from Marathon. I have a couple comments. One is slide number 7. Can you go to slide number 7? Yes, this slide. So this is the sulfur recovery unit. I see that you have a SOx limit of 12 ppm. Does this limit only apply when the SIU or the incinerator is fired on natural gas only, and when there is no load, meaning when we don't have acid or high H2S gas go into the incinerator? because when the incinerator has high acid gas, the SOx number is going to be much higher than 12 ppm. It's indicated on the slide.
Right. This one, there was a warranty from the manufacturer on the sulfur limit, H2S emission limit from the sulfur recovery unit at 2.5 ppm. So, but in terms of, I don't think so, it is based on natural gas. The only one are NOx and CO for the incinerator. But the SOx, for more details, we need to go through the permit. And if you provide us with your written comments, then we can reply to you regarding this issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, another question is, can you go to slide number 4? With regard to 200 ppm BACT limit, if we had control valve and if the leak is 500 ppm, what we try to do is try to get it below, try to fix it as low as we can. But let's say in a situation where we cannot get it down to below 200 ppm because there's no packing in the control valve. Control valve is used to control something, fluid movement or something. But if we cannot get the leak below 200 ppm, the only option that we have is shut down the unit, which is very costly, and it's going to cause a lot of emission increase due to startup and shutdown. So we're asking for the exemption for the control valve.
Let us go back to this one because also Nick mentioned that, and Patty also, about the other air districts exceptions. So we will look at that to see that how they define their exception. Then we can also look at that, and if it applies here, we will include it in our BACT determination. But we need to do more, study on that topic. But thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, I think just, expanding on it, this is an example of what's been permitted. There may be, sounds like lower limits in other districts, but then allowances for that occurrence. So yeah, we'll dive into that. Thank you.
So I guess let's go to Rita, and I believe I don't see any other raised hand, then we can go through the part D. Rita, could you please go ahead?
Thank you. I just wanted to underscore a point that Carl made because I think it deserves recognition, and it does extend to a broader policy issue that it seems like the district rules are not really well equipped to handle pollution prevention processes. So they're, in my experience, the mold where equipment or processes fit well is when you generate a VOC and destroy the VOC. But what happens when you are not generating that VOC in the first place? And Carl was mentioning a situation specific to the slides presented, but we deal with the same issue of having very low VOC levels that are barely detectable where there is no test method that can measure these very low levels of VOCs. So I think as we move forward with policy making, I would hope that the district is cognizant of this issue, because ultimately what the district wants is to reduce emissions. So if we're not accommodating the technologies that are bringing that forward, then I think, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot if we don't approach the system in a way that we keep the big idea of emission reductions front and center. Thank you.
So just to quickly address that, Rita, thank you for the comment. We did add pollution prevention to the guidelines a few years ago. So that is taken into account for BACT guidelines, but comment is noted. Thank you.
Okay, so Pippin, is it about the part B? Could you please go?
Yeah, it's just a couple quick things. I know I should have spoken up a little earlier when we were doing the SRC member portion, but I guess I noticed a couple of things similar to some other comments where the limits, the proposed layer limits and the source test results, and I understand why, but that is something that does, that we do notice. And the other one, I did actually have a question about the linear generators and exactly what the source category was for this, because it's listed as linear generators, non-emergency electrical generators, natural gas fired. But does that mean that will be the layer limit for all, I must say, prime power natural gas generators? Where's the... Or is that just for linear generators?
That's a good question, actually. This would be a completely separate BACT determination, and this is only applies to the prime power right now. It is not for emergency case. So we will add this linear generator as a new listing to the guideline for the prime power and only fired on natural gas.
But this only applies to the linear generators. So it's a separate listing in itself.
Okay, so it wouldn't supersede conventional IC.
Right.
It does not.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Paul, could you please go to slide part D? So we have two new proposed BACT determination for smaller facility minor source. The first one is the cannabis extraction processing. So this BACT determination we presented once in the last SRC, but because of we were waiting for some source test results to come and get reviewed by our staff. So we take it out from the last round, and now again we put it back. So as a relatively new industry, facilities are being permitted for cannabis extraction using the hydrocarbon solvent in our district and other air districts. So pretty much they use that flower trimmings and they put that in the mesh bag as you see on the left hand side. So it is a frozen plants that they put it in those bags, and then they put it in those columns in the middle. So there are different type of technologies in the market right now. This one you see here, this is a closed loop hydrocarbon extractor, which is a kind of modular extraction platform. So they put those bags in those columns, and then it is a closed loop, and they kind of soak the bags into the hydrocarbon solvent. And for this case, mostly is butane. So they give it time, usually is about 30-45 minutes that it gets soaked in the solvent. And after that, the extraction happens. And we are usually expecting to see the emissions when they open those columns to remove the bags, because the final product or the intermediate products usually is they take it out from the bottom of each column. And then after that, they put it in the oven. As you see, there's a vacuum oven on the right-hand side to get the final product. So what our concern is the VOC emission from the columns, because when they open it, it would be some sort of emission, VOC emission coming out. But pretty much since it is a closed loop system, we do not expect to see too much of those VOC. Our source team, they actually did the source test on this facility last year, and they evaluate that, and they look at the mass balance type of calculation. So pretty much they measure the amount or the weight of the butane goes to the system at the beginning, and then they measure it at the end. And by doing the mass balance, it shows that they are like pretty much like 96.5% VOC recovery efficiency. And we are planning to permit this equipment at 95%. For cost, because this is a Part D determination, it is for minor source. It is we are requiring to do the cost effectiveness based on health and safety code. So we got some cost information from the manufacturer. So we will evaluate those costs before we propose it to the next BACT SRC meeting to make sure it is cost effective for this type of facilities. Next one, please. The last new BACT determination is for the chrome rubber asphalt oil blending system. So this facility produces asphalted concrete. So when they produce the concrete, they use a mixture of the asphalt oil and chrome rubber instead of just using the asphalt oil. And the benefits of using the chrome rubber is they can reduce the, first of all, asphalt oil usage. In addition, it will increase the elasticity of the final product. And also they wouldn't be worried about the recycling of the rubber that would normally go to the landfills. So this facility, they use the carbon absorber, the granulated carbon absorber to control the VOC emissions from the tanks. So they have 2 tanks for mixing of the chrome rubber and asphalt oil. And the VOC emission from the tanks firstly goes to the primary canister, including the carbon absorber, and then and the efficiency about like more than 90%. And then after that, the VOC leaves the primary canister and it went to the secondary one for the further control. So this facility is currently operating their carbon absorber since 2020. And based on the mass emission inlet and outlet data that they provided and has been source tested, it shows that the source test results were about 97.6%. So we are proposing using this carbon absorber at 90% control efficiency for this type of operation. And again, since it is a minor source BACT determination, we will look at the cost data, make sure that it is cost effective before we propose it in the next round. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over again to Bettina to go over the rest of the Part D and other part of the BACT guideline and policies.
Thank you. So there's a few updates that we want to include here. One of the first one is to update the thresholds for the Riverside County portion of the Salton Sea Air Basin for the VOC and NOx. Those are changing from 10 or from 25 to 10. This isn't something that we're changing now. This is an update that we're just updating our guideline based on the rules. So as far as emission calculations, we have a footnote in our guideline already, and we're including in that footnote the link to the document to explain the policy for determining pre-modification potential to emit. It's titled Procedure for Determining Pre-Modification Potential to Emit under Rule 1306 Air Pollution Controls and Rule 2005 Emission Increases. And as far as the SRC updates that we are looking to do, we're asking right now for anyone who's interested in being on the SRC to send us your interest by email. You can email that to us at the BACT team at aqmd.gov, BACT team at aqmd.gov. This is going to add you to our list of interested parties for the SRC membership. We're going to be going over the list very soon to determine whose seats are expired and who is interested in a reappointment, et cetera. So we'll be doing that. And we're going to include also an update to change the name of our department has changed from engineering and compliance to engineering and permitting. So any locations where that word needs to be changed, we're going to change that. Next slide. So for our cost effectiveness, every quarter we have to update those values, and we get these values from something called the Marshall and Swift Index, which is a valuation service that is responsible for making an appraisal guide for developing replacement costs, depreciated values, and insurable values of buildings and other improvements. So every quarter we go through, we take the number from that list and we add it to our listing here, and we use that number to decide, once we calculate the cost effectiveness of the minor polluting facilities, of any changes being made there, then we compare that cost effectiveness to this chart to determine whether or not that modification is going to be cost effective. Next slide, or do you want to take Bill's question?
I guess let's wait till the end. I guess you have maybe 1 or 2 more slides, then we will stop and go to questions.
In the rest of the updates here, these 2 rules are currently in the process of being SIP approved. So we're waiting on those in order to add to our guideline. And these 2 aggregate dryers and the metal melting furnaces were previously in Rule 1147, and now they're getting their own sections. So we need to make sure that we update our guideline to reflect the current date of the rule, if it's been updated. And basically that's it. We're just making sure that our guideline is referencing the current rendition of those two rules. Next slide.
Okay. Already. So let's go. This is before the reopening to the third part of the agenda. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, let me, I think we have some questions on this agenda item, but I wanted to just clarify something, because we talked about interest in BACT SRC membership and then reinstatement. We'll be reaching out. This doesn't mean if you don't hear from us that we'll take you off of the SRC membership. We're just revisiting the membership. I'll put it on everyone's radar, but conditions are changing as we come out of the pandemic. And certain legislation that allows for remote participation may be changing. That hasn't happened quite yet, but we're looking at it. So it's very possible by the next SRC meeting, we may be reverting back to how we were pre-pandemic and having mostly in-person attendance, but with some remote locations noticed. But we'll be getting more information as it comes to you. Just wanted to put that on your radar as part of it, as when we reach out to you in the coming weeks and months about your membership. And then we can open it up for questions.
Yes, please. So I see Bill Lamar. Bill, could you please go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. I have more of a curiosity question rather than a scientific one. I was looking at your slide 11, and I wish Barbara was in the room. I guess she could answer this. How is it that you can permit a cannabis extraction system against federal law? I know it's allowed under California state law, but under federal law, and your agency receives federal funds, I think it's kind of analogous to banks that are FDIC insured. They can't accept money deposits from cannabis retailers, so they have to go to other sources to protect their sales. So I just wondering how you get around that you can give them a permit to operate when it's against federal law. Just I would say it's a curiosity question more than anything else.
You can address, or we also have legal counsel present.
Yeah, that's great. But I just want to point out that we're not deciding what goes into those canisters, and we don't know how much of. I know the Farm Bill describes exactly what can be in something in order to be legal according to federal law, and we're not measuring those things. So I don't know how we can decide that.
Oh, it says cannabis extraction right on your slide and processing. I don't know how much. I don't know how you want to be evasive about it. I mean, you know what's going
And
on.
then, yeah, Brian, I see you unmuted. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I don't know that my supervising attorney would have an answer on the spot for that question. And I'm not sure what relevant federal restrictions you're referring to. I know there's like the schedule classifications for drugs and all that, but I don't know that that extends to equipment categories. That is something, if you are curious and land on more information, I would say you can submit written comments and we can take a closer look. But I don't know if I have more to offer.
I'll ask Barbara the next time I see her, or I'll send her an email, because it just seems analogous to your what you're authorized to do under the health and safety code. But and I'm not against cannabis. I'm not against the occasional toke every once in a while, but I'm just more curious than anything else.
Thank you, Bill. Wayne, go ahead, please.
Thank you. It's about slide 14, where you're talking about cost effectiveness. And I noticed that all the rules are based on VOC reduction. And yet in slide 14, you're doing a calculation on ROGs. There must be some policy or some institutional reason for the dichotomy there, because I'm just curious how what's going on there.
I believe we are using those two terms interchangeably.
Yeah, we kind of use VOC and ROG interchangeably. So as far as
I mean, I know that forever, EPA has preferred VOC, and they have their whole VOC, basically measurement series, and I know that others have preferred like CARB, I think, but maybe Pivoting a comment had preferred ROG, but I'm just curious. So when you do the calculation, you just say they're equivalent, I think is what I'm hearing. I'm just curious, that's all.
Yep. Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
I will just jump in here really quick on this one. This is a super interesting topic, and we could go down the wormhole, and let's not. But this is non-methane hydrocarbons, ROGs, POCs, VOCs, right? You can just go down the list of these whole family of compounds that are almost TOG, right? These are all things that are almost identical and have minute differences, but in practical terms, they're the same.
Yeah, thank you, Pippin. I'll just add, I think where it really comes into play, the important part of it is when we are establishing a standard is whatever methods being used to verify compliance is that it's consistent. And that's where we really hone in on it. All right, we'll open it up.
Checking if there are any public comments, any hand raised.
Let's open it up for this agenda item. If there's any members of the public that wish to comment. Okay.
Not seeing any, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Slide number, Bhaskar?
Next slide, Paul. Number 16. Okay.
So the first one is the BACT technical assessment for biogas flares. These are other topics we wanted to share with you. So on January 2019, South Coast adopted Rule 1118.1 applies to the facilities operate on non-refinery and for the flare emissions. So one of the resolution added on the adoption of this rule was to monitoring those type of operation. And for this Senate Bill 1383, sorry, I heard echo. If you can mute yourself, I appreciate that. So the Senate Bill 1383 implementation required that food waste goes to some elsewhere instead of going to the landfills, and pretty much we're expecting to see some of them end up to the wastewater treatment facilities. So we keep monitoring those type of operation. We were in contact with some of the sanitation districts to see that if there is any impact from those food waste going to their facility, because it caused the ammonia in the food waste can cause the NOx emission from the non-refinery flares. So far, we haven't heard any active project at this point. It seems that some of those sanitation districts are trying to secure the solid waste from the waste facilities. So they haven't started any construction as we know so far, but at the same time, we want the sanitation districts or any other industries that they are aware of those type of operation, that if you're going to receive those type of food waste to your facility, let us know, then we can be able to monitor that. In addition, I wanted to mention that our rule and planning staff also, they are working on a technical assessment. They already published the draft version of that, looking of through other options that can be used instead of sending them to the flares, for example, injecting them to the pipeline, or use them in the combined heat and generation facilities, or for producing electricity. So this is something that we are actively looking through, and we appreciate that if you can provide us with any information when you started to get those type of waste, waste from food waste. And
David has some comments.
Yeah, David, go ahead, please.
Thank you for getting back to the subject. I think that's my fault to have you do that, but I appreciate you looking into it. Just as an update, this is something that's a very slow process. It's dictated by SB 1383, and cities and counties that are supposed to divert the food waste haven't implemented as quickly as we thought. So it's going to take a little while. But as far as the technical assessment, I assume this is not being published yet. I saw a draft document out, and there's certain comments and statements in there that I want to make sure are corrected. Like, for example, to say we'd use battery backup rather than flaring the gas, and that's just factually not correct. The gas is going to be generated no matter what. You can't just shut off a digester. So my question really is, what's the status of the technical assessment, and what's the forum for commenting on that?
Let me, as much as I know, because again, this is from our planning and rules staff, and like you mentioned, we just look at the draft version. I know they're planning to have a future meeting with you guys soon, but I guess we have Mike. I'm not sure if we have Heather here. They can provide us with some more details. If not, oh, I see Mike Cross is here. Hi, Mike.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Yeah, David, we can talk to you further about this.
Sure. We can talk offline.
Yeah. That sounds
Thanks,
good.
Mike.
Yeah.
So if we do not have any questions, let's go to the two other options, then we'll open it to the SRC members and public for comments. So I'm going to hand it over to Bhaskar. This is about the emergency stationary IC engines. We actually established the BACT determination in the last round, which has been approved by the board. But we also last time have some discussion regarding the testing guidance. And as we mentioned, this testing guidance is not part of the BACT determination, but we wanted also to make sure that we have a clear guidance for us and also for the facilities to make sure that what is the testing requirement, the general testing requirement. So I will hand it over to Bhaskar to provide you with some the last updates we have on the guidance memo.
Right, so we're still working on the guidance memo. We're pretty close to at least releasing a draft for review by the interested parties. Basically, what we are trying to do is, have some guidance on how those Tier 4 final engines would be tested. Some of the things that we are looking at is whether PM testing is really required or not when you're using a ARB certified DPF. You look at the data and, with and without, the PM is pretty much the same. So we are considering not requiring when the DPF is certified by ARB. So that's one thing we are looking at. Other is, modified methods for the testing of those engines. We'll only require testing at two loads, 50% and 75%. That pretty much covers, those two loads cover 60% of the weighted average that goes into this certification test. So that's what we are considering. Another thing that we're looking at is ammonia testing, our source testing, looking into alternate methods like FTIR or TDL that you can use. And instead of doing the method 207.1 test, so that would help you getting those results right away. And minimizing the impact if you have multiple engines, you can do pool testings. That will be covered. And if the manufacturer has done the testing on those engines and how we minimize that and maybe not require initial testing, but some kind of testing every 3 years or 5 years, depending on which schedule you are on. So all those issues are being addressed. We are talking with engine manufacturers. We are talking with other districts. We are getting to know of some of the issues that are coming up while testing, and we are looking into those also to make sure when we put out our methods, especially it seems on the flow measurement sides, there have been some issues with other districts testing. So we don't have a source test yet from a report yet from Bay Area where there's some issues were found, but we are looking into that and we want to address those. And a lot of these are already addressed in the draft that we currently have. So that's just a quick update, and I see there are some hands raised, so let me go through that. David Rothbard.
Thank you, Bhaskar. I appreciate the discussion and you working with us on the subject. But just to clarify, the testing that would be applicable is for the situation where you have a Tier 4 compliant generator. If you elect to get a Tier 4 certified generator, the testing would not be applicable. And the reason that's important to me and my folks at Essential Public Services is the Tier 4 certified generator has an auto shutoff mechanism that really is problematic for an essential public service. So do I have that right? I just want to make sure that everyone's understanding the same thing.
Yeah, we have typically not required testing on certified engines. We take the EPA certification as valid, and initial test or subsequent test we don't require on those engines. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and one other clarification, we are still focused on the major sources with this guidance. As with the last BACT effort, it was just adopted for major sources and not minor sources. So if there were a minor source to be, that were to install a Tier 4 final, we would revisit that or revisit this test guidance.
Thank you.
Carl?
Thank you. I really do appreciate the district looking into this and having this conversation along with BACT, because BACT compliance demonstrations are a critical component of BACT. And as we look at the emergency engines, I think we have to recognize a couple of things that are easily overlooked. They are harder to test. Testing them is more dangerous. Testing them is more costly than we are used to seeing on other sources that you might imagine. Our technicians are at risk, and their risk is extended on these engines because of the design, because of the way they're fit into the facilities, and even more so because of the way testing is being required to be conducted by other air districts. We're learning a lot because of what's happening elsewhere in the state. And it's not just the source testers that are learning hard lessons, it's the facility operators. We are being asked to budget upward of $20,000 a test for emergency engines. I have been told for budgetary purposes to budget upward of $25,000 to $28,000 because of the special logistics that are involved and because of the time demands that are placed on emergency testing. We have asked the Bay Area to consider a few things, and I'm asking South Coast to consider them too. Not so much test method, but engineering permitting practices. The first of which is, let's consider a concentration limit instead of a mass emission limit. We've done that on other emission sources, including recip engines, and it could be done in this case too. By testing only concentration limits, we are able to significantly reduce the test duration, reducing the test cost, reducing the safety risk to the people doing the test. Keep in mind that the most dangerous part of the engine is the exhaust stack. So if we could have an opportunity to propose, or the district take the initiative to consider an equivalent concentration limit, that would help significantly. That would also speak to the challenge we have in measuring fuel and validating our fuel measurements. As you alluded to, a lot of emergency engines do not have fuel meters. They predict fuel consumption. And in a typical test program, that presents challenges. The other thing we're asking for, and I can't recall what the district's, South Coast district standards are for testing, but the other thing I would consider is an extended period of time for the initial source test. I agree it's not as critical in the South Coast because we're looking at this for major sources only, and the volume's not there. But when you get to the point to where you start rolling this out, I am afraid we will see that the source test volume that the district manages and that we manage will become unwieldy. What we see up north is, by squeezing in all of the logistics that have to be managed into a 60-day test deadline, it increases the costs of all of the vendors that are participating. We can't use man lifts in a lot of cases. We have to build scaffolding. A lot of our test programs are on the top of a 20-story building. We can't move our test vans up there. We have to dismantle our test vans and get them to the top of the building. Managing all of that in 60 days requires an enormous amount of money, and usually test teams from out of the area, because we can't get everything done. So if you could do those two things, that would be an incredible improvement in the whole program. I would also suggest that a clearinghouse of test data be considered. We're not talking about just startup tests. We're talking about 3-year tests on these engines. Spending that $20,000 or $30,000 every 3 years after 60 or 80 hours of operation. There's no sense in any of this. Again, if we had concentrations, it would reduce those costs. And I agree that it's odd that we're testing PM when for 20 years the district has convinced us that there's no uncertainty in the ability of PM filters to work. Starting to test them now makes no sense.
Thank you, Carl. Let me jump in, and I think we can kind of generate a little discussion off of some of that. But definitely hear you on the concentration request. We have heard issues communicated to us about flow measurements, which I think is, part of that where it's coming from. Could you expand a little bit on what your experience in the Bay Area as far as, so we're looking at 1,000 horsepower and greater at major facilities. The test regime, are you looking at the 5 load test, or could you put in more context and what contaminants are you doing?
Actually, they're testing single load.
Single load.
To my knowledge. When I spoke of this $20,000 to $25,000 to $30,000, that would be if we were testing for particulates in addition to the remainder of the suite of pollutants, NOx, VOC, ammonia. So that's what we're dealing with there.
If we take out the particulate from the equation, then that would be significantly lower.
In the mass emission testing world, and with the 60-day test deadline, we're being told 15 to 20 up there. And again, it's a surprise to me. A lot of that is managing the logistics, and a lot of that is the inability for us to efficiently dispatch to multiple projects because of the 60-day deadline. I do recognize that the economic drivers in the Bay Area are different, especially as we're talking about these large engines. And the volume increase is high, likely higher than it is here. But I would also like for South Coast to keep in mind that any policy that you're putting together needs to be flexible enough to deal with any changes in the permitting programs we have, not just today, but 2 years from now and 3 years from now.
Thank you. And one more clarification. Is this for compliant engines, or is it testing of all engines, including certified?
We test only for compliant engines.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think, we appreciate it. We've been going through this process because we do recognize some of the impacts to this. Thank you for recognizing it. Took us a little bit longer as more and more issues came up that we have to address. But at the end of it, we're just looking to have some confidence if those, the EPA if we do veer away from the EPA certification, that we have some long-term assurance of compliance. But we do recognize the issues you bring up.
Thank you.
Absolutely appreciate all the help that Montrose has given us in this.
All the information, the protocol, really helpful. Thanks. So I see. Thank you. So I see we have 2 hands raised, but can I ask Wayne and Rita just hold, because we have Carp here to give us a very brief update on the AB 617 clearinghouse. And is it okay we come back and then go to SRC and then the public? Thank you. Pepe, if you're ready, can you just update us on the AB 617 clearinghouse?
For sure. So I planned on this being very, very short, and I might make it even shorter. But roughly speaking, just a big picture, we have a contract in place to develop to transition the existing prototype technology clearinghouse, which there's actually a picture of on the slide that was up there a second ago, but to transition that into a final version. We're about a quarter of the way through that process, and we're projected to complete that in the summer of 2024. So we're excited about that.
Sorry, Pippin. Paul, could you please go back to number 16, slide 16? We have the picture of the clearinghouse. Thank you. Sorry.
I mean, the picture isn't particularly exciting, but there it is, or the current version of it. And that, just so everyone on this call is aware, that technology clearinghouse, that database will include information on BACT, BART, CARB rules and next generation technologies for all the air districts across the state. It sounds really easy, but it has turned out to be plenty challenging. Some of that discussion happened today when we started to talk about attainment, extreme non-attainment, and the thresholds, et cetera. But anyway, just kind of an FYI. We are updating some of these tools. The most recent one is we do have an updated version of the residential backup power tool, where we're highlighting some more of the battery options. There's a lot of movement in battery technology right at the moment, and so we're highlighting that so that when members of the public want to look at that and see what their options are, that they can kind of understand more clearly what the battery, especially the zero emissions options are. And then finally, I do want to highlight, and this is sort of tangential directly to BACT, but we have been working with many of the air districts and KEPCOA to help answer questions about how stationary sources are permitted across the different districts. And again, this has something to do with that there is some variability among districts, and it's a convoluted process, right? And again, some of that got brought up today. I heard that the rule limit was 5 and the BACT limit is 2.5, and like what gives, and that those, understanding that, and we try, I don't know if we get there, but we certainly try to help, members of the public better understand how those components fit together when setting a permit limit. And just kind of an FYI, we have developed some tools to go with that, including some interactive tools. And actually today's CAR board hearing, we released 3 videos of a 9-part video series about where we try to explain, again, this won't be super valuable to members that are on this meeting because we already have a lot of this background information. But if your friends and family are excited about air quality and want to watch some videos on it, we are releasing some in that space. And then finally, back to these questions from the public, we do expect to release the last group of those this spring. We spent about 1.5 years working on them in 3 separate sort of releases. So that's where we are right at the moment. So any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer those here, or feel free to email me.
Thank you so much, Propane. I really appreciate all the work you're doing through this AB 617 clearinghouse and the Q&A questions. They did a great job over these past 2 years. So let me finish with the last slide, which is the next steps, and then we will open it to the SRC members and the public. So we really appreciate if you can provide your comments in a written format to us by March 9 after this meeting. So we receive all of those. I mean, we heard all your concern and question, but would be very much helpful for us if we have in a written format to address them also in the board package at the end. So we are expecting to have our next BACT SRC meeting following by 30-day public comments sometimes in the second quarter of this year. And then if it is needed, we will have the third BACT SRC. So we are expecting to go to the Stationary Source Committee by the end of this year, and then taking the whole package to the governing board next year, beginning of next year. So again, please provide us with your comments in the written formats. And by that, let's open it to the SRC members. Okay, Wayne, you have your hand raised for a while, and then after that, Rita, please go ahead and ask your question.
It was back on slide 16, the slide there. I forget which one it was. I'm back there. Yeah. So I also had some comments on the, because I've done a lot of testing on IC engines, as you know, from the past meetings. So I think the changes you're making are great, because those tests just for the fuel alone, when you get to 1,000 horsepower, 2,000 horsepower, I mean, it's just so costly to do that. The one thing, an observation on PM, we're doing a test out of state now, and EPA is not requiring PM to be measured as a marine engine, which was sort of interesting. They're interested in the NOx only. So that's, I think, something that's looked at. The point that I think to keep the perspective on is that the PM is collected on a filter, and you need a required weight before the filter is considered adequate. And in terms of its PM mass, and the point of it is that usually limits your testing, and it takes a long time for these, these units with filters on them. Basically, there are, if the district was interested, there are some real-time surrogates that could do semi-quantitative quick look just to make sure it's properly installed. It'd be real time, you'd know then and there. Or as you're suggesting, you can just move on to the gases. The modified testing at the 2 loads, I think that's great. And the last thing I wanted to comment on was the alternate methods for ammonia. I think that you're opening that, that doorway there is very appropriate. I'm liking also that you're looking at the relationship between the engine if the engine manufacturer has tested these, because that could have been a problem. So basically no PM required, or like I said, if you talk internally and you want a surrogate, you have PM experts at the district, you can ask them, or I'd be willing to make comments on that. Modified testing, great. Alternate ammonia testing, also great. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
I appreciate that. And again, I want to thank you. You too. You spend a lot of time with us, providing with your old reports and the testing you have done in the past. It was very helpful. Rita, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And I'm glad I waited until after Mr. Mader's presentation, because my comment was going to be on AB 617 and the BACT clearinghouse. First, I wanted to thank CARB for putting the clearinghouse together in one place. I know our members are using it all throughout the nation, and they're assisting customers even in other states to figure out and give some general guidelines as to the requirements. So we really appreciate that. And just thinking out loud, I also sit on the Local Government Small Business Advisory Committee, as some of my fellow colleagues here do. And in that committee, we have a process where we appoint a member from that committee to serve on the AQMP Advisory Committee. And I'm wondering if maybe we could come up with a process to do a similar thing, to appoint a member from the BACT SRC committee on the AB 617 committee, since it does have a BACT component. So just putting that idea out there as I reflected on the slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rita. David, go ahead, please.
Thank you. A question for Pippin, I think, as far as the AB 617 clearinghouse, is that something where CARB is looking at that as establishing BACT for the air districts? And just curious as far as if that is the case, since CARB is looking to electrify, is this something where you would start recommending that rather than a combustion technology, that electrifying or doing battery backup would be deemed as BACT? Just curious what direction CARB is going in on the subject.
That was a surprisingly dense question. Yeah. So the current, as currently, I was working on it currently. It is simply a conglomeration of all BACT for all districts. To be frank with you, I think that it's really the questions about what happens, can you go to zero emissions, where is the authority in stationary sources? I think those are well beyond what I can talk about, honestly. I don't know those answers. I'm not sure that anybody really does. But stationary sources are, in the realm of the air districts generally, especially for criteria emissions, and anything beyond that, it starts to be, a lot of policy that's, to be frank, above my pay grade. So,
understood. It is a complex subject.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of it is we would like to and continue to support zero emissions in a bunch of these categories, and they are listed as a separate as next gen, right? Because they're not backed in the regular sense of things.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So I don't see any question from our SRC members. Is there any question from attendees? I don't see any raised hands. If you have any.
I want to be very specific. Any open up for public comment on the BACT technical assessment for biogas flares, the engine test guidance, and those items, and the other items are all open for public comment right now.
Again, if you raise your hand, we'll move it to the panelists so you can
All right.
ask the question.
No public comment.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And then
Thanks,
do we have any other open up for general public comment for items on the agenda? Any public comment for?
No public comment here.
All right. All right. That concludes the meeting. I want to thank everybody again for their time. Very good discussion. Lots of new topics on the table. We'll be getting information, to everybody in between this meeting and the next meeting. You see everybody's contact information up on the slide. If you do have questions in between, we'll keep working on that test guidance and continuing to compile the proposed BACT determinations and working on some cost effectiveness determinations as well. But for today, I want to thank everybody again, and please stay dry over the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anusha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.